partners and service providers. Um, what I was going to do, Paul, first and foremost, was just draw everyone's attention to your editorial, excellent editorial, which came, which is at the top of our newsletter, so which hopefully everyone would have received, which kind of summarizes as follows. It's time for AI to humanize at scale content and services. And the reason I put this first is because I think this has been inspired by the sort of three or four stories that came.
Well, actually, it came out before the three or
Well,
four,
no,
the three
okay,
other
so
stories.
okay,
Actually,
so
it heralded the arrival of this big news this
okay,
week.
so would you mind if we went off with that one first? Because you're quite
No,
right.
absolutely not.
And anyone that watched the last podcast, it was we had some sexy time. We were talking about AI with regards to content and service, and specifically some of the applications that were coming out from the so we say from the adult sector. But so well, let's go with your editorial, Paul, and then we'll dive into the stories below that. And Paul's editorial read that the AI chatbots have come a long way in a short time, according to the latest app usage data in 2024. And I thought this was really interesting that mentioned that AI downloads were at 17 billion, were 17 billion times last year. Sorry, hang on a minute. Apps mentioning AI were downloaded 17 billion times last year, and they have
Mhm.
seen a 200% year-on-year growth in terms of spending by consumers. And time spent in apps such as Character AI and ChatGPT are totaling nearly 7.7 billion hours. Right, it's a huge number. I mean, that kind of
Mm.
says it all in terms of how important and how influential it is. Why don't you give us an introduction with regards to your editorial, and then let's dive into the other stories.
Well, the editorial was sort of inspired sort of by some of the things we talked about in our last podcast, where we were looking at virtual girlfriends and how some of these sort of OnlyFans content creators are using AI avatars to basically run their own services 24/7. So they're messaging people and all that sort of thing. Shortly after that, this survey from what used to be App Annie, are now called Data AI, who look at sort of app usage every year, drop their sort of report looking back at 2024 uh, with this headline that sort of AI apps or apps mentioning AI in some way were downloaded 17 billion times, up 200% on the previous year, 7.7 billion hours spent in at least two of them. Um, really sort of showcasing how AI has sort of just become so prevalent everywhere. What is interesting about this data AI research as well is that for the first time, things like AI, streaming TV, and social media have pushed gaming apps down to fourth place in the most popular things. So it's even sort of surpassing gaming. Now, most people can't escape this week the launch of DeepSeek, the free cheaply developed Chinese generative AI. So AI is everywhere. That the DeepSeek one, I won't go into too much detail because it's all over the news everywhere. Is open source, so any developer can use it in any way they want. There are some shortcomings potentially with what it covers because of political sensitivities of the Chinese government, but basically it has thrown AI right into the middle of everything. And interestingly, this all happened after I wrote this editorial about how this use of AI, particularly to create things like chatbots, and how it's being used in the adult industry to offer sort of virtual sexy chat, um, is something that's going to just expand into how businesses use chatbots and how AI can power chatbots to make them uh, a personalized experience at scale, and that can be used around content services in any way as well. You know, their marketing tools, their management tools. That it's just all there. I just was trying to blow my own trumpet, really, that we were talking about this 2 weeks ago. I wrote about it 1 week ago, and now it's all over the mainstream news. Um, sort of the sort of biggest sort of news story there is currently,
Uh,
really,
Anyone
about
would think
but
you knew what you were talking about.
well, it does. Yeah, it surprised even me. So yeah, that was really sort of an intro point because then off the back of that, we've had these three other AI based announcements, which we're going to talk about now.
Yeah, well then. What a beautiful segue that was. Well, let's do that. So,
Thank you.
the first of the three AI-driven tales is relating to Telefonica Tech and the launch of their Gen AI platform, which to create customizable virtual assistants. Now, I think probably yeah, let's stick with that first. I mean, it's a whole there's a whole range of issues around this whole kind of virtual assistant chatbot type scenario. I'm an old man, I don't like it, but it sounds to me as though the introduction of really highly developed AI technology is potentially going to convert people like me, because apparently these things are going to become as good as human beings. And we did touch on this last week.
Mm. Absolutely, and this first story about Telefonica Tech, which is the sort of tech development arm of Telefonica, the massive pan global mobile operator, is that it's obviously, like many tech companies, investing in AI. It's creating a platform for anyone, businesses in particular, to create virtual assistants. So this whole idea we were talking about sort of chatbots that are customer service agents or HR agents and all sorts of things like that, that we were talking about in the editorial, which we just mentioned, it's now being offered by Telefonica as a service. They've used sort of large language model programming, like all generative AI, to create these chatbots. So from sort of speculating about how this might take off last week, here we are with a a major product launch from a major telco offering this kind of technology. And I think it's interesting because this sort of technology is something that adds a whole new kind of business service to what can be offered to companies so they can communicate with their customers. It's all in a way sort of tied up with CPaaS and messaging and all those sorts of things. But really, what's very interesting is this is it's a clear demonstration of a network operator really looking at how to pivot its business away from just carrying minutes and bits to actually offering sort of high tech technology services at the sort of cutting edge. And I think the sort of play here is to prove that the AI tech, and then I imagine Telefonica will roll it out through its various operators as a service for businesses, that businesses pay them to use this tech to create their own virtual assistants and their virtual call operators and all that kind of thing. So I think, one, it's an interesting use of AI. Two, it's a really interesting uh, sort of glimpse of how network operators suddenly, well, not suddenly, but it's now all in the news, are pivoting into actually how to leverage this sort of stuff to make their businesses different.
And why just for the those of us out there that are perhaps not quite so familiar with how you differentiate between various AI applications, why would Telefonica's AI platform and AI product be better than Google's? So, how do they see the differentiation? Why do they feel that they have to have their own rather than partnering up with
Well, I think they're all trying to do it. I mean, they're all using existing what are known as large language model technology that underpins generative AI. So they probably haven't developed the whole generative AI part themselves. They'll be using someone else's. It doesn't go into details as to who, but I imagine they're using, OpenAI's ChatGPT or one of those sort of products, at least as the foundation for it. And I think Telefonica's idea is, one, it's a land grab. Let's get in on this quick, while it's all up for grabs. Second, they already have a lot of business customers because they service them through their sort of telecoms business. It's, I guess, in their view, an easy sort of add-on to go, well, look, we do all this for you. Why don't you? You need to have a virtual sort of chat assistants. This is the sort of economics of how doing that using AI can work for you and the money it can save. Do that through us and use our technology. Yes, of course, any business could build its own. They could use this DeepSeek Chinese one probably to develop their own. They could go to Google. They could go to any of the other existing ones. Telefonica, I think, has just thrown its hat in the ring. It's very early days. I was going to say it's a bit Wild West. It's not really that Wild West, but there's a lot of companies all vying for this. And you're going to see a lot of the big tech players offering AI and Gen AI products to facilitate this. As we'll see in the other couple of AI stories we're looking at this week,
Yeah.
there are other ways that this is being rolled out. So it's a bun fight right now for those early gains. If we talk about this in 5 years' time, this will be a very different landscape, and things like this may have worked. Telefonica might be the dominant force in creating virtual assistants. It
Yeah,
might
yeah,
be a
yeah.
company we haven't even heard of yet that doesn't yet exist. So, yeah, the reason that people would go for this is they're existing customers of Telefonica. Telefonica's offering a very sort of bespoke virtual assistant creation business, is my assumption as to what they're going for with this.
And of course, mobile subscribers tend to be quite loyal to their networks, don't they? So
Absolutely, yeah.
imagine, especially a brand like Telefonica, they do have as we've, in the telemedia industry, and as many content providers and service providers will always want to try to partner up with MNOs in order to access those
Mm.
subscriber bases. But not they're not always the easiest kind of businesses to work with. So it's going to be interesting to see
Well, quite.
how